Hey guys, it's Tim coming at you with a brand new episode of The Spotlight, the show where I pose an interesting question or just a general interesting idea and then have you guys take it from there in the comments. So here's a question that we were obviously going to get to at some point down the line, so why not talk about it now? The idea of rebooting and when you should reboot and when you shouldn't. Just for clarity's sake, let's define a reboot as something that remains within the same medium as the previous incarnation of this particular franchise, but follows its own distinct continuity, so we don't confuse a reboot with an adaptation, which follows its own continuity, but switches what medium it's in. Reboots definitely have a negative connotation to them when they're brought up in most contexts, especially with the advent of the internet and people being able to look up things that they grew up with or previous incarnations of various properties much more easily than they were able to, say, back in the 90s or even early 2000s. And to a degree, you can definitely see where a large amount of the skepticism comes from, especially with movies, since remakes or reboots of movie franchises tend to be more looked down upon, and even of lesser quality than the ones that were made popular to begin with. But if we look outside of that to different mediums, especially in my opinion animation, a lot of reboots tend to work there. Let's look at one of the most notable examples of this, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, the 87 series is probably the biggest the Turtles have ever been. It was the huge increase in their popularity, they got stage shows, spin-offs, pretty much anything under the sun with that, and to this day it has a huge fan base behind it. And then in 2003, a new animated series came out, and it also garnered a huge fan base to the point that there was debate between which one was the best series. And then flash forward to 2012, and the same thing happened again. Now, obviously in all these cases, there are fans of one particular incarnation of these turtles that don't like any of the other incarnations solely because they're not their particular version. And that's going to be a huge obstacle that pretty much any reboot is going to have to overcome, and lots of times really can't, regardless of the quality of the product, the previous fan base of the original version of it. But back with the Turtles, the fact that they were able to 3 distinct times create 3 distinct fan bases for the same exact property pretty much shows that they figured out the best way to do a reboot. But what does that entail? Well, in the case of the 2003 series, it has a lot to do with timing. While the Ninja Turtles never really went anywhere, there was definitely a decline in their popularity between 1996, when the previous animated series ended, and 2003, when the new series started. The only thing that really happened between them was in the year immediately following the cancellation of the animated series, they had a live-action series done by Saban called The Next Mutation, and we all know how that ended up. And even then, the last 3 seasons of the animated series tended to get a mixed response due to a change in direction of the way the series went. So it had really been about 7 years that the Turtles had really had the level of relevancy that they had previously had, so there was a much more open market for reintroducing the characters. And because so much time had passed, they were able to really go in their own direction without necessarily having to follow what the previous series had done. And they provided themselves with a brand new fan base to appeal to who may not have been around during the original run of the series. And even the 2003 series started to decline its fan base with different decisions that it made after the 4th season of its show. So even though the 2012 series didn't come out that far after that series had ended, there was still more of a receptiveness to getting a new version of the Turtles since the previous one had started to lose its luster. So with movies and TV, it seems to be a combination of the amount of time that's passed between the previous incarnation and the current incarnation, and whether or not the previous incarnation had started to lose interest of its viewership around the time that it ended. Similar to what happened between Batman and Robin and Batman Begins. Batman and Robin wasn't particularly popular, and they waited 8 years to reboot it. So if we bring this back to comic books, one thing we'll find is that you're really never going to have this particular situation with that medium, since comic books are typically an ongoing medium with continuous stories that really have no definitive beginning or end. So it's hard to decide what time would be best to reboot in terms of a comic book medium, since you're really never going to get that same grace period that you get with other mediums. Obviously, some would say never, but you also have to admit that there have definitely been times for comic books have rebooted, and it's generally done well for the company that has done it. But what are your guys' opinions on this? When do you think is the best time to reboot? Is there a certain period of time, a certain grace period that you feel has to be met in order to justify a reboot? Do you feel that a reboot can be justified just by the differences that are in it? Should they wait for a new generation of audiences to spring up to do this? Or should we never attempt to reboot and just leave things the way that they are? Well, let us know in the comments. If you guys are interested, we have a Patreon account that you can donate to should you feel so inclined. And I'll see you guys next time on The Spotlight. Later.